Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Kitty Alicee, co-founder of Counterpoise Wellness, an organisation determined to shake up the wellness industry and make affordable, no-nonsense, private therapy more accessible to everyone. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm really good. I mean, the sun's shining. Everyone's happier when the sun's out. And yeah, I'm doing good.
So I think we'll start at the beginning. I like to ask everybody about themselves. So I'm going to start with, how did you become Kitty Alicee?
Which is such an interesting question.
Go anywhere with that.
I've been listening to your podcast, and I find it really interesting how people will take that in completely different ways. And yeah, it's a great place to start. It really got me thinking. I think I would start by saying that I'm a daughter. I am a sister. I had a lovely childhood growing up. I was so fortunate to have such a supportive family that really shaped me to be the person that I am today, whilst also having something happen to me when I was younger, which has caused childhood PTSD, and living and managing that in every phase of my life. I feel like when something happens to you when you're younger, you're kind of always navigating it through every stage of your life as you progress, and kind of a different understanding. And then as a teenager, I've always tried really hard at life. That's something that I've always done. I want to work hard. I want to succeed. And I try and kind of lead life through a positive lens. I really kind of try and live by that. So I had a great schooling experience. I worked really hard. And then when I was about 15, my childhood PTSD kind of reared its head again. And I developed anorexia nervosa, which has really shaped me to be this version of myself today. I was battling anorexia nervosa for 10 years in what people tend to call active recovery and active kind of anorexia, but I definitely believe that it's always with you. Just as anything that happens in our life, it shapes us, doesn't it? And so I still say that I'm recovering. I'm just recovering in a very healthy body now. So I had anorexia nervosa, and I always kind of thought that I would do something quite corporate, and I really wanted to work in business, and that was kind of the way I was heading. And then part of my anorexia journey meant that I was bedbound. I was in hospital. I couldn't walk. I had to learn how to use my body again. And that kind of passion and that strive to always want to do things well meant that I just adopted the whole recovery process and ended up forming brilliant relationships with my recovery team. So physios, nutritionists, therapists, and went to university to study strength conditioning, which was not on my bingo card at all. That was not something that was ever part of my life. But I was learning so much about bodies and humans and how we work and how we do things. And I had this mission that I wanted to walk again and I wanted to do life again. So I embraced that, and it meant that I did a degree, which is quite extreme, actually, looking back. Didn't need to do that, but at the time it worked. And I went to university and was very much in the depths of my recovery. I was doing a lot of discovery about my body, about my mind, who I was. I felt like I kind of missed out on chunks of my childhood because of trauma and then from an eating disorder. And it kind of felt like this new chapter of like, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here? It kind of felt like a new lease of life. And it kind of steadily evolved from there. I was so fortunate that I got to work with elite athletes in the GB pathway. I worked with the Paralympic pathway and was learning about all these different people and different conditions and different ways of doing things in a very basic way. So like I was saying earlier, everyone does life differently, right? But I was also meeting these people that had they had implications of how maybe they couldn't talk, or they couldn't control their movements, or they had to navigate things on a whole new extreme. And I got to be part of that journey, which was so interesting. And whilst I was working with some incredible athletes, I was working from a physical stance and I was kind of training them daily, and I was part of their team, which was brilliant. And the pathway that I was part of was just great. I mean, I absolutely loved that experience. I was traveling a lot with work. And so I lived the athlete's life with them. And I was coaching these people. And as I was coaching and spending so much time with these people, they were kind of telling me more about their life and telling me more about themselves. And I know people say this in multiple different professions. I know that hairdressers say this. I know that coaches say it. When you're working with people, you build a rapport where you learn more about people, and people start telling me stuff about their lives and kind of working with me in a way that felt like, yes, it was a professional, but I knew this person now, and I was really developing this relationship where I was loving my work and I was surrounded by so many incredible people, and every single person had a different thing that they were managing all the time. And the pathway that I was part of meant that there wasn't always that extra support. So I felt like I was a little bit out of my depth. I'm not a therapist, but I was kind of being used in that way. I could speak from a human perspective, and I will today. I've got lots of lived experience that I draw upon, and I'm so fortunate that I've lived such a full life. I was just out of my depth, and I just didn't know kind of what to do with certain themes that were coming up. And so all I could do was be real. And that got me so far, and that was brilliant. And then I started finding other incredible professionals to work with, just to kind of draw on different skills and progress myself, but also say to people like, oh, have you ever considered therapy? Or have you ever thought of, I don't know, EMDR or hypnotherapy? Or like, have you ever considered these things? And it kind of grew my awareness of all these different skills that people have that you can kind of add to your own toolkit. And so I started doing that with my athletes, and then people started saying, oh yeah, no, Kitty knows someone that could probably help you with these things. And it just started snowballing a little bit. And I was like, this feels really basic, but maybe people aren't using all these different people. Maybe people didn't do the kind of path that I followed, which was when I was in recovery and I wasn't very well, I was like, right, who can I get to help me? And I was so like, who can I draw upon? Research. And actually, some people are just like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. And I was able to kind of say, oh, have you thought about this? Or maybe that would work. I don't know. Does this sit well with you? And then COVID hit, and I thought, maybe I should do something with this. Maybe it would be great to work with other professionals that are evidence-based, and there's kind of science there, and build something which is almost a bit of a well-being hub, is how I pictured it in my mind. Drawing on lots of different skills and people using each other to grow their own professional practice and refer on where it's appropriate to do so, but also give people a place to go to when they maybe aren't in a good place and can just ask for help. And there's lots of different things there. It's not just one person that might get it wrong, because we're all human. You've got a breadth of support there.
I think it's the very essence of a safe space, isn't it?
Exactly that.
Yeah. Firstly, that word stuck. That is, I think, the most descriptive, non-descriptive word that anyone can use. It's the word that fits. It's the word that fits. People say to me, they talk about their emotions and they go here and they go there and they go there and they go here and they go up and they go down and they go everywhere. And then they just go, I just feel stuck. And I'm just like, okay. It's that whole feeling stuck, that overwhelm. It's like being in a room with no doors, no exits, or being in the desert where you can go any direction. There's a sense of overwhelm and a sense of stuckness that comes with both.
Yeah.
I find that, I can imagine. We have something in common. I used to work in strength and conditioning as well. I used to work with powerlifters and athletes and stuff like that. Yeah, I did a lot of competition stuff a long time ago. And I resonate with what you're saying, because you get to know people, you get to know what's really going on. And what I learned, especially when it comes to, say, weight loss clients, is they would come to me and they would say to me that they are unhappy because they are overweight. And actually, most of the time they were overweight because they are unhappy. Yeah. And as you start to work with them and you start to listen to them, you start to realize that maybe they're not happy in their relationship. Maybe they're struggling with being a new parent. Maybe they're having problems with their friendship circles or their parents, or something's going on. And they are dealing with that by outsourcing their emotional regulation to food. Yeah. And exercise is sometimes the anchor, isn't it? That helps. It's that key habit that as long as you can keep doing that, then everything else makes sense. And then if you can't go to the gym or you can't exercise, all of a sudden you don't feel like you can eat well and all these different things. And that switch as well from looking at food as this hedonic thing that you can have all the time to looking at it a little bit more like fuel. And also recognizing that there are times for that. It's okay to have a biscuit. It's okay to have milkshakes. It's okay. Like we went to the beach on Saturday, me, my kids and my wife, and we had ice cream. It was like the best ice cream ever. And I had zero guilt and I did not care.
Yeah, that's what it's about, isn't it? Everything in moderation. And I think what you're saying, like we talk so much about mental health, physical health, emotional health, social health, and it's like, no, it's all of those. It's all of those things. And by doing one thing too much isn't healthy either. And it's having that balance through everything. I mean, counterpoise means equal balance, which, looking back, I wish we didn't call it counterpoise, because people are like, counterpoint, what? But when I saw that it meant equal balance, I was like, perfect. Because I think there's that kind of theme out there of, and I mean, I lived by it, wanting to do things well, but actually some things just you have to find like a middle ground with things, because you can do things too well as well and kind of neglect things on the flip side of that.
Just before we move into counterpoise, because I think that's an important part of your story and who you are. And obviously shut this down if it's something you don't talk about, but I feel like the listeners would want me to ask, do you ever talk about the trauma and what it was and what happened, or is that not something you talk about?
I do. I do talk about my trauma and kind of how I got to. I feel like my trauma was a starting point, and then everything kind of evolved from there. But because of how my trauma happened, and I was so young as a child when this trauma happened, that I've never known a life without it. I've never experienced how I might be as a person without it, or who I am without it. I've never had that. I've never known anything different. And so I talk more about the impact that the trauma had, because I feel like now that I'm an adult and I've got lots of my friends that are having children, I feel like I'm processing it all again. Like it feels so raw at the moment, which is so interesting, because like if we were doing this kind of recording last year, I've probably just like reel it off and bullet point things for you, and kind of I had a bit of a numbness towards it. But where I am at the moment and seeing children that were the age where I experienced this trauma and kind of where they are now, I'm looking at it through a completely different lens. So at the moment, I'm not really talking about it in the same way, but I'm really talking about like the impact that it has on absolutely everything that I've ever done since. But I kind of look at my trauma hitting in different ways. Like, yes, it had a starting point, which was my childhood, which is childhood PTSD now for me. But then I had another round of trauma when I was anorexic and kind of really struggling then. And then after my anorexia, I was in a relationship which was a very abusive, controlling relationship, and had another huge impact. And I think what we might go into, and when you've had trauma from a young age, kind of you're always operating in that fight or flight, so much so that you kind of don't realize that you're generating it for yourself sometimes as well. Like you're kind of keeping yourself in that state because you know it and it's safe.
It's such a hard realization, isn't it?
And I mean, and it's literally now I've got a different therapist, and I've been so lucky that I've always had kind of therapy as an option to me, and I've experienced different types of therapy as my processing's kind of happened at different stages in life. And now I'm feeling probably my most vulnerable in my trauma. So I'm not really talking about it as much, but I'm definitely talking about the impact, because...
No, that's absolutely fine. I always try to be the podcast host that asks the question that if you're driving down the motorway and they go, oh, ask her this, ask her that. At the same time, I always make it clear to the guest that if I ask you a question and you don't want to answer or talk about that, just say, okay, that's how it is in real life, isn't it? The kids thing I really resonate with, because I'd always compartmentalized who I was as a kid to who I am now. I looked at myself as a child and an adult as almost two different entities.
Yeah.
And what that did, it enabled me to talk about it really freely and easily, at times even laugh about it. It was bizarre. It was that dark humor that comes with trauma. But when I had kids, all of a sudden I could see 8-year-old Johnny in my son.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I thought, I can't imagine what happened to me happening to him. Wait, oh, whoa. And these dots start connecting. And I think what it does is whether, for me anyway, is, for me, I put myself in a little prison, a little traumatic prison for a really long time. I kind of took over the role of my father and kept myself where I felt I was always comfortable, even though I didn't like it because it was familiar. That was where the comfort came from. But for me, it was about recognizing that I looked at events in the past and I tried to change them in my mind. I tried to make sense of them. I tried to recreate the narrative. I tried to recreate the meanings. And you can't do that. You can't. You're not a time traveler. You can't go back and change it. So what is it that's still hanging around for me? Well, it was the emotions that were created within those events. And I like to call them emotional imprints. So something happens to you and it has this significant emotional imprint, like a footprint in the sand, and it doesn't go anywhere. And every time you have any sort of anything close to that emotion, you feel all of that all over again to some degree. And you have these emotional responses that are similar. You have these emotional outlooks that are similar. You have all of these emotional shitstorm, basically, that comes with it, which people say, oh, you need to get some control of it. You can't control it. When that happens, when you have that emotional reaction, you have as much control over that as you do if your car's plummeting towards a tree. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. So what can we do? We can look out for these people, these places, these things in our life that invoke these emotions. We can work on how our relationship with that emotion and what it might mean and the meaning behind it. That's certainly the way I've managed it since then, is I've recognized that these emotions come up and that stuffing them down, that doesn't work out so well.
Yeah. Oh, I love what you're saying. I mean, you articulate it so beautifully because, and I really resonate with what you're saying. And I think there's something, and I'm not saying that something's worse than something else. But I don't think that's how things work in life at all. But I think there's something quite unique about childhood trauma, is that when things happen to you as a young person, you haven't lived yet. You don't understand. So there's that confusion. And I think for years, I kind of beat myself up on the fact that I didn't understand things. And I was like, why am I so confused about this? And I think that's why I struggle to talk about my trauma, is because I was so young that actually, if that thing happened to me now, I'd be able to be like, okay, I understand that. And I understand those words and I understand those actions and I understand kind of what you're doing to me. I understand that because I'm an adult. But and this is so recent, it's really interesting that this is coming up, but what I really resonate with what you're saying is very recently I've learned to kind of let go of that and kind of look at it as, okay, yeah, my friend's got a newborn, my friend's got a 4-year-old, and kind of the ages that my trauma was happening and how it happened to me was over a longer period of time. And I was looking at these children and I was thinking, God, I'd never expect you to understand or know these words or figure it out. And actually, it's kind of allowed me to let go of some of that frustration that I had that I was internalizing and wanted myself to figure out. Because it's like, when something happens to you as a child, you don't expect a 4-year-old to be able to articulate it and be able to explain and tell you what's going on. And so that's what I was asking myself to do. I was like, why don't I get it? For God's sake, like, I wish I could just understand what's going on. And then when I kind of flipped it and was like, no, I'm not asking 4-year-old me to know what was going on and understand what happened and figure that out. And that's really offered me this kind of like, oh, I can breathe a little bit.
What sounds like you're saying is that a meaning that you applied with absolutely no context at all as a child. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to go back, and when we have that emotion for the first time, that experience that creates that significant emotion, we give it a meaning from the place that we're at. And if we're 4, if we're 8, if we're 12, then we give it a meaning that has no context and has no bearing, and probably is completely irrational, probably doesn't make any sense because it's from a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old or 12-year-old. And we spend our whole life with this irrationality, even though we're a logical adult now, and we don't understand why this event affects our relationships with our friends, affects our relationships with our partners, affects our relationships at work. Why all of a sudden when something happens, it triggers an emotion that we then put a meaning to, and then we create a whole story around, and before you know it, our behavior gets impacted. And it's about understanding those emotions and giving yourself the opportunity. And I think this will segue very well onto what Counterpoise does. But I think that is a part of what therapy does. It allows you to go back in a safe space, revisit very difficult feelings, very difficult events, and just reapply a meaning, one that doesn't tear you down and destroy you, one that actually builds you up and helps you keep moving forward. So, with that said, what is counterpoise?
Counterpoise. Wow. Where do I begin? Counterpoise is an incredible business, which I'm so, so proud to put my name to. I have to have little moments, like little pinch me moments. I'm like, wow, look at this. Counterpoise means equal balance. How counterpoise was formed was by identifying that to keep me well, I know that I need to go to the gym 4 days a week. To keep my partner well, that he needs to be able to go for a run and he needs to see his friends. He needs to go to the pub once a week. Like that's what keeps him well, which is completely different to me. And who are we to dictate what keeps people well? So a lot of the time I feel like sometimes therapy becomes one of those like, I think you should go to therapy. Maybe go to therapy. And actually, I don't think we should ever really say that to anyone. I feel like therapy is one of those things that you have to be in the right place for the right time. And so why we built Counterpoise was to offer different elements of well-being so that no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're feeling really vulnerable, maybe in the darkest place of your life, or whether you're feeling so strong and empowered that you can actually look at some of the harder things in your life, or if you just want to progress or you're just trying to figure stuff out, there's different avenues of support for you. So we are a multidisciplinary team and we focus on health as the broad spectrum that it is. And so we offer different services within that. So we've got nutritionists, we've got strength conditioning, we do yoga, we do therapy and all the different types of therapy that fall under that very broad umbrella. And it's a place of evidence-based practitioners coming together to support clients wherever they are in their journey, whether they need immediate support, whether they are just trying to figure stuff out. Counterpoise is there to provide accessible, affordable support, which isn't, I need to be careful how I say this, because I have my own opinions on some of the therapy that's out there, but
Let's make her say stuff. Come on, let's make her say something.
not telling a cure. And I think that's what we can fall into is when we're feeling desperate, we're looking for a cure. And I think what we need to understand is that's not always the case. Life, is there a cure to life? No, life happens. We're working through stuff. And so we are a team, myself and the other co-founder, Jess, we vet all of our team, and something that we try and live by is good, solid people that have the experience and the qualifications behind them. And the way we hire people is, would I recommend this person to someone that I love so dearly, like a friend or a family member? And that's how we hire our people.
Love that. Love that.
That's something that we always come back to. That's kind of the last question when we're looking at our team. And it's a place that we've built, which came from a place of desperation for myself and my mum, who is the other co-founder. We experienced such an incredible system, which I'm so fortunate that we have in this country. And I think the NHS is, I can't say enough good things about the NHS. I'm so grateful for it. And it really helped me. However, it is a system that is so stretched. And I refer back to this story about, I was in hospital. I was given 2 weeks to live at one point. So I went home and I was with my family and I was kind of trying to navigate what that meant. What do I do now? What do you mean? 14 days? How does that work? And I received a letter through the post saying, your referral has been accepted to talking therapy. You are on the waiting list. And the waiting list was 18 months. And I was like, hang on a second, you've just given me 2 weeks. Like, what? That was a pure point of desperation for me. I mean, I felt like I was on my own. I'd got to this place in my life where it felt like I had no options now. I had nothing. And I couldn't even get the help that I decided I wanted and I really needed to recover. And suddenly it wasn't available to me. So we started Counterpoise kind of from that moment of, God, if things get better, if we're able to do something, let's try and make a positive difference so that people don't have to go through this feeling, because this is horrible.
I don't think listeners would forgive me if I didn't ask how you pulled yourself out of that 14 days. What happened to change that?
Every story is so unique, whether it's mental health or eating disorders. And the way my eating disorder came about is I was suicidal. I was using food as my control because I was definitely going down the path of I didn't want to be here anymore. And I had made other attempts, but I was still quite young and I wasn't aware of kind of other avenues. And I was controlling food as a way to eventually not exist. That's what I was doing. That was my mission, which I know is not always the case for people, but that was very clear for me that I was getting to that point. And my organs started shutting down at that point. And I was making a conscious choice. I had so many incredible people that were part of my journey that were helping me from many different points of view, from a nutritionist, from exercise, from movement, mobility. But I just rejected it all. I didn't want any of it because I had this clear, the world would be a better place without me here. I don't want to be here. I can't continue living this way. So for me, when I was told that I had 2 weeks left, it was like, hang on a second, this is my choice. I'm choosing this. And now you're telling me that I don't have that choice. Like everything was quite like a power thing for me and a control thing. So as soon as it was like, well, I've lost control because I'm not in control of this anymore. It's so bizarre to say. And I know some people will probably listen to this and be like, really? But there was something in my brain that just shifted. And it was like, I've got 2 younger brothers. I have got friends which have sat on my hospital bed and said goodbye to me. And it wasn't until that moment that it kind of clicked. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this timeline was not my timeline. And now here I am. And everything that I had, my parents were brilliant in that they documented everything. So even when I wasn't taking anything in with the nutritionist, I wasn't taking anything or any of this information in, they were writing things down. So I was just going through these books and looking at things and trying to identify what I could potentially do to not have this 2-week timeline. And I honestly did wake up the next day and just thought, well, 14 days here. And then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does, cool. Maybe I will buy myself more days. And I honestly adopted that mentality. It was, what can I do today to give me another day? What can I do today to try get a bit more time? And I started very small things. Like I was still a very young person, just trying to figure out my next step. And sometimes it was just, can I eat something? Can I move in a certain way? Can I talk to someone? Can I ask for help? And, people say it takes a village. It did. I used everything that I could get access to. And it was slow and it was so painful. I cannot tell you the pain that it was physically and mentally. But I slowly clawed back days. And now I'm 29 and still here, still doing all right.
I mean, firstly, I feel compelled to say I'm so bloody proud of you for that, because I can't even imagine what it must have been like. I want to acknowledge the physical and the clear mental aspect of what you had to endure. But I also want to say, I've been thinking about whether this is true, and I think it is. I think what you just said was probably one of the most significant things that I've ever heard said on this podcast. And the reason for that is because suicidal thoughts, suicide, all of those things there's no real words that can do that whole topic justice, and how it feels to be in that spot. It's terrifying, it's illogical, it's sad, it's frustrating, it's so many emotions all at once. But you said that you felt that you were basically adopting a slow suicide, and it was about control and about power, when I think a lot of mental health gets to a detrimental stage when you feel completely helpless and overwhelmed by life. And any time that you can control something, it feels like you're winning. And the reason why I think that story is so significant is because what you said there is a real life example of how something like that can change. Because when you feel suicidal, you truly and honestly believe that the world is better without you. Yeah. And that this is the only option that you have. It's not a game. It's not attention seeking. It's real. Mm-hmm. It's real, and it's an intention. And what you've just highlighted there is 3 things that you don't want to do, but will help. And you can't change sometimes certain things that happen in life, but you can change and you can reframe how you perceive them, I suppose. And what you said there was, it was about power. And instead of saying, I've got control of my life now, somebody said to you, no, you don't. 14 days. And you're like, what's it about that? Now, on a slightly darker humour side, I mean, that just speaks to your stubbornness. And then also that ability to reframe, just looking at it from another perspective, the power that has, the way it can change somebody. And secondly, the importance of getting support. As soon as you stop talking to people, as soon as you stop telling people how you feel, then you're at the mercy of your own dark thoughts and them intrusive thoughts. And then the clawing back, I heard small steps. I think when people are overwhelmed, it's because the task in front of them is too big.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not about, okay, I'm going to survive past 14 days. It is exactly what you just said. I'm going to survive today. What can I do today, right now? What small thing can I do? Maybe I have a bite of this. Maybe I have a bite of that. Maybe I drink a little bit of that. So I just want to say thank you for saying that, because I think that is significant, extremely significant. And I think it's a wonderful story, albeit very challenging and all of those things. But wow, you're amazing.
Oh, thank you. No, and I'm so grateful for it as well, because it kind of,
You never thought you'd say that.
well, and that's it. Like, it's kind of where I was with that first question, which is like, who are you? Who's Kitty? Who's Kitty Alice? Like, tell me, how did you get here, sort of thing. And it's like, of course, so many good things, but also so grateful for all of those awful times that you just never saw ever kind of getting out, or can't see that there will ever be light again. And I'm really careful when I say that, because I feel like some people might listen to this and might think, yeah, well, you probably didn't feel this then, because I can assure you that there's no light. And that is how I felt. That same. And as you were talking then, there's been some incredible documentaries of people that have felt suicidal and have acted on it, and they've survived their attempt, whether it was jumping or whether it was whatever avenue. And there was this really interesting documentary that I watched. I'll see if I can find it actually. And it was talking to the people that had survived those attempts. And I think this documentary was actually done on people that there was a bridge that they did it on, and they were talking about kind of that moment that you jump and that split second in the air. And the people that had survived were just saying, no, there was that split second, like everything was awful, everything was black in my life, everything was so dark. I couldn't see anything. And then as soon as I let go, there was that little moment that I thought, what am I doing? Like, and that moment of regret. And I'm so fortunate that my journey was different, and I was given a bit of a timeline, and I was able to I wasn't in that position, but that I could kind of resonate with that. And again, I'm not comparing, I'm not saying that the same situation or anything, but there is that sort of moment where you think, if I'm going to get to the end, there's no opportunity for any possibility. Like that's the permanency of it was, for me, what kind of shook me a little bit awake.
Yeah. I mean, I've never shared this publicly, I don't think, but I've never had suicidal thoughts really, bar one time. And up until that point, I perhaps would have agreed with people that said that suicide is selfish and it's a choice and all of these different things. I would have maybe agreed with them in that front, but this really helped me understand in a sense. And I was going through something unbearable. And I was cutting some fat off some steak, and I was in emotional pain, and I just turned my wrist to turn the steak over, and I just saw the knife next to my wrist, and I had this overwhelming urge to just do the obvious, and it scared the life out of me.
Yeah.
And I just threw the knife down and I just run off, and I couldn't believe I can't describe that feeling. It was so real and so doable.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is what happens. People don't plan sometimes. Sometimes they're just in so much pain. They're not trying to end themselves. They just want to end the pain. They just can't think of another way. Luckily, I was able to recognize that in that moment, but that's the only time I could, and it helped me understand that this thing is real and you need help. And I got help after that. I did.
Yeah.
I got help after that because I wanted to understand what was going on there. But that's the only real example I've had of it. You know, I've been, considering the things I've been through, I've been really fortunate in that sense. But it's just, it can happen where you take control and you plan over long periods of time, or it can happen suddenly. This thing is lawless, absolutely lawless.
And from exactly what you're saying, like, it can happen to anyone. There is no profile. And I feel as though when we talk about awful things that can happen, like people being diagnosed with cancer, I mean, there's that it can happen to anyone. There's no set person, there's no nothing. Yet somehow with mental health and suicide, there's this almost, it's looked at differently because it's almost written in that it might be a choice, might be an action. And I think
doesn't feel like it.
To take away, and your experience, and like I'm thank you for sharing that, and I'm so glad that you're here. Thank God you're here and able to kind of this ripple effect that you've created in everything that you do, and talking is helping so many people. But it can happen to anyone, and it's not a failing. It's not something that is chosen. And I think that's almost the shift. And you've experienced that, so you can resonate with that and you know that. But maybe people that haven't had that, there is still that, is it a choice and is it selfish? And I think when we grieve, and if you've been affected by suicide, you've got to go through that. And I think that's important to go through. But also that understanding of two people here chatting that have had that. And it's something that is so hard to explain, but it doesn't feel like a choice. And actually, it feels like something you've got to do, which is not selfish at all. It would make the world a better place. And that it's so hard to explain, and it's so different for everyone, but it's so desperate.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful language, because there'll be people that will be trying to apply logic to an illogical situation. It has no logic. That's why it can't be applied. It's an emotional storm. It doesn't make sense. And that's all intentional. Here's the thing. Therapy, for me, when I needed to stop drinking alcohol, the only thing I could do was go to therapy. It's the only thing that's ever worked. Yeah. Because I sat there and look, human beings, we organize our mind through conversation. And unless you're going to sit there and have a massive heart-to-heart with yourself on your own, then I don't think it's going to get you very far. So sitting there and having somebody ask you those questions, those ones that you don't really know the answer to, the ones that you don't dare ask yourself because you don't really want the answer that you know is true to be true. And all of those different things, that's what, for me anyway, that was my therapeutic journey. One of the things that was interesting for me is that I'd had therapy with women because I'd had, and it makes sense now on reflection, because I'd always had quite a disruptive relationship with older men based on my father. So it wasn't until I realized that, it sounds so bad, I don't even know if I should say this, but I'd found myself, because of the knowledge I have and the things that I'd been through in my life, I was able to manipulate female therapists by telling them what they wanted to hear or navigating the conversation. There were times where I had therapists where they started crying and I started talking about their problems. That's how much of a good job I did. And it wasn't until I spoke to a man, the only man I've ever had therapy with, and I remember him breaching on a topic, and I started my manipulation. Now, I can't say it was intentional. It was just my way of defending myself against emotions I didn't want to experience.
Yeah.
And he sat and he listened to every piece of rubbish that was coming out of my mouth, all the nonsense, all of the little games I played to try and navigate myself away from these difficult emotions. And he just said, I just want you to know, I say this with love, I know what you're doing and I'm not going to play. And I was like, oh, I feel seen. Yeah. And it was what I did is it stamped respect on the conversation. It was just like, don't do this with me, son. And I was just like, okay, good. And what he did is he might not know this, but he took on a father role that I needed.
Yeah.
And he said, come on, son, let's talk about this properly. And that was when I started to realize that he said something really poignant to me. And that was, you don't have to give up alcohol. If we talk about these things, these reasons why you drink alcohol, then alcohol will give you up. It will have no purpose anymore. And that's how it feels. I don't need to drink because I don't have that need anymore. Because it doesn't mean that my life's perfect and I don't have problems. Of course I do. I just deal with them differently. I've got tools, which brings me back on. Anyway, I feel like I've done way too much chatting today. So
I really like that. And I think there's so much to that, isn't there? Because it was the right place at the right time for things. And you sought out a different therapist that was male, and you sought out those things. And actually you were in a place where, yes, someone could call it, but also you had put yourself in that position ready for it. And similarly to you, I've had lots of different types of therapy. I've had lots of different therapists. I've had some really good therapists and I've had some not so good therapy before. And my abuse and my relationship stemmed from losing faith and being scared of men, which is it's really interesting because I've got two incredible brothers and I've got my dad in my life. But my childhood PTSD was because of a man. And then the relationship that I was in that was controlling and very traumatic was with a man. And now I'm with a male therapist. And sometimes you have to put yourself in those positions, don't you? And you're
Give me full body goosebumps, that Hal. My God.
But it's also so healing. And sometimes it's having that, isn't it? And I wouldn't have been ready for that, like even a few years ago. And there's so much power in like the time and the place, and when you choose that. And even though when you were explaining then, and the story that you were saying about your therapist kind of calling you out a little bit, like you put yourself in that position to be called out. Like there was part of you that was like, here we go. Like it's just interesting, isn't it?
Well, it's that ownership. It goes both ways, doesn't it? Like as much as you might be sustaining the depression, you're actually the only person that can pull yourself out of it. And sometimes there's a subconscious part of us that's fighting still. Yeah. It says no. You know, we're not designed to give up. We don't give up. It's interesting, like you say, those moments when you jump from the bridge, and it's like, although you don't have any autonomy, the brain is still trying to work out, how do we get out of this? So I resonated a lot with your post about men and mental health, and I think it has more impact coming from you as well, being a woman, and especially the things I didn't know, like the experiences you've had too. So
that's so interesting, because I always find talking about mental health is so vulnerable anyway, because everyone experiences it, and you're putting it out there, and you never know where people are when they're taking it in, right? You must find this with the stuff that you do and your talks that you do. You have an idea of what you want to talk about, and you can't manage how everyone's going to receive that, because everyone's coming and looking at things from a different perspective. But speaking about men in mental health, I feel as though I know what's happening. I mean, I run a therapy business. Like I know the stats. I'm seeing what happens. We run events and retreats, and we have these really brilliant conversations with all genders, and there are some universal themes, and sometimes I feel like, oh gosh, could I comment on that? Because I'm the age I am. I'm a white female. I'm not a man. I'm not male. I'm not a person of color. I am who I am, but I also am who I am and can be human. And some things are universal and some things do need to be spoken about, but I'm really cautious about what I talk about. So it's interesting that you received that well, because there are always going to be touchy subjects that you just have to be careful how to navigate.
But I think what's beautiful about the way that you've described your story, because your story is your story, there's nothing, I mean, I'm sure there's loads you'd love to do about that, but there's nothing you can do about that. That is your story. And what you've done is you've embraced the parts of that are helpful. And for you to go through what you've been through, and for it to have had the impact on you that it's had, and for you to still be able to see men that way, I think is just really special, and gives me a lot of hope as well, because I do work with a lot of men and they say a lot of things, and I hold my hand up. I help them with that. I get them to look at it from a less angry perspective and help them understand you're playing into the narrative here. Let's drop the anger. Let's start to look at it from that other person's perspective. Instead of being angry at their views, how about we get curious about their views and we help them understand a different way? And be that person. Like one of the things I'm most proud of is there's a charity here in Cornwall called George's Voice. And it's a good friend of mine, Sophie, whose daughter unfortunately took her own life during the pandemic because her funding was cut for her therapy. And I know, it's horrendous. And within 3 to 6 months, what she did with that grief was she set up George's Voice. And she helps lots of young girls who are going through those emotions and suicide and finding life difficult. I'm one of the only blokes that's been allowed to come in and speak to the girls. And like, I can't put into words how much that means to me. Yeah. The fact that because I am a guy they can trust. I am somebody that is looking after them. One of the things my son said to me once is that when we were talking about one word to describe, and I thought I was going to get the worst words ever. And they said protector. And I thought, good. Because it was the one thing I didn't have when I was a kid. So it meant a lot to me that I could pass that on. So the fact that I am allowed to go in and speak to those women like that, and that they receive it so well and that they get something from it, is really special. So, here's the thing, we're men, when women, we've got different genders, but we're all human, right?
Yeah.
We're all human and we're all trying to understand each other. And it's that curiosity about someone else's views, even racism. There's always something in there. You're not born a little baby racist, are you? It doesn't work like that. Anyway, as I said, I've done too much talking today because
Yeah,
there's
I
a
know.
few things that I think that are really important that we must address. But if you were to say it in a nutshell, like what is therapy? How does talking, or as some believe, dwelling on your problems, how does that help?
Yeah, I mean, this comes up all the time, right? And I think there tends to be a misunderstanding with therapy because therapy is not just one thing. It's not a standalone sort of prescribed. There's not one way of doing it. And I think that's where I find it quite difficult because I often get people that say, yeah, I tried that, didn't work for me. And it's like, okay. And this is where it's so interesting. Therapy can be so many things. There are so many different modalities of therapy to begin with, and kind of getting a bit of an understanding as to what you're going in for, and looking up what does CBT mean, what does DBT mean, what does EMDR mean. You can kind of then identify what you are entering and what you're going for, because there are different things that you need. I've had CBT before and I've had EMDR before. There are so many different things that you can get from therapy. And I think there's a misunderstanding about dwelling on your problems. You're working with a professional who is highly skilled and trained to help you give it the appropriate amount of time, and who will lead you along that process of, no, this is really important that we actually stay in this discomfort, and this is really important that we actually look at this, and it deserves the time because maybe it has never had it before. Maybe we've never spoken about this, but you're in a safety net of support with a therapist who knows what they're doing. And I think you almost have to trust that a little bit, because there will also be some things, and a skills therapist, if you find a good therapist, they will know kind of when it's okay, now's the right time to look at something else, and actually let's move on from this point because you need to move on. You can't stay stuck in this place. And so the whole sort of idea of dwelling on your problems, I think, is misleading in itself. You're not dwelling on your problems. You are giving something that is still in you and is part of your makeup because it happened to you or with you or around you, that needs to be looked at and deserves to be looked at. And doesn't mean that you're dwelling on it. It means that you're maybe exploring it, maybe trying to make some sense to it, maybe looking at it from a different stance. It's not dwelling. The idea of dwelling, for me, makes me think that you just kind of sit in it and it's like, oh God, this is awful, and it's probably not going to get better. There's not kind of like a pathway to it. And I think what therapy is a pathway to it. And you can go to therapy with a goal. You can go and say, I'm stuck at the moment. I don't want to be stuck. And you're working with a professional who's going to help you kind of navigate that route a little bit. But I also want to say that there's importance to dwelling, if that's the word that we want to use. There's importance to that sometimes as well. And having someone that can sit with you in that and look at it from a different perspective and ask you questions. And I think we're a master of our own minds, and we kind of think that we're in control and we know everything that goes on in our minds and our life. And I know me. Like, ask me anything about me. I know me. And then when someone looks at your life and you're explaining it and they're like, oh, did you think about it this way? It's like different therapists for different things and different things at the right time, and trusting that your therapist has the skills. And if you disagree and if you find that you're dwelling and you don't want to dwell, talk to your therapist about that. I think there's that sort of, your therapist is leading the session. No, this is your session. You're leading the session. I've said times to my therapist, like, you are really pissing me off. And it's like, yeah, you've just said something that was really, really annoyed me. Or being able to say, like, I don't want to sit in this moment anymore. Yeah. But sorry, therapist. Or moments where you say, okay, I'm really not okay right now and I'm stuck in this. Talk about that. That's part of the therapeutic relationship, is being able to take control of that session too. And there might be times that your therapist says, no, we're going to stick with this a second, but let them explain that as well. I think
in some ways that's a good thing, isn't it? You're starting to take autonomy of the situation. It's a good sign sometimes, as you say. Other times you're just avoiding something.
Yeah, your therapist is there to help you with that, not kind of keep you in a position. And I had someone say to me the other day, it was so funny. They said, yeah, but my therapist doesn't really want me to get better because then they're out of business. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I felt so sad for them, because I was like, that is so not, God forbid, therapists are there because they actually want to support and help people and they know what they're doing. And you're not their sole business. Someone else, like, we all have mental health. Like, your therapist is rooting for you.
I think it's a good day. It's the worst business strategy ever, but the best day is when the client doesn't feel they need me anymore. That's the best moment. It means that we've both done our job well.
Yeah.
You know, but I think for those people that say that they've tried therapy, I think that's like saying you've tried potatoes. Yeah, okay. Did you have it as chips? Jacket potato? Was it roast potatoes? Was it crochet potatoes? What was it?
I'm going to adopt that analogy.
It's the same thing, isn't it? It's just like, I've tried potatoes, I don't like it. Well, there's some questions I have here. Well, potatoes, was it that? Because they're boring. Yeah. So I love chips any day. But okay, so what about the people that say, what if I open up, lose control and break down? Surely it's just safer to move on and learn to live with it.
Oh, you see, I find this so interesting. Yeah. Okay. So the way I think about this is I had a period in my life where I rejected therapy, and I had this kind of volcano of emotions in me that anyone in everyday life could spark a little bit of anger, a little bit of sadness in me. And this volcano inside me would just erupt, and it would trigger all these emotions that weren't actually rational to that little bit of sadness that I was feeling in that moment, because someone said, oh no, I don't want to do that with you, actually, no thanks. Or no, I don't want to go see something. Or like that little moment of sadness, it was the feelings that I were feeling were just totally irrational. It was kind of like I was on this tightrope of, oh God, when am I next going to not be okay? Whereas I think by taking control of, okay, I need to look at some of these emotions and figure a few things out, you're taking ownership of those feelings and you're in control of that. Then you're figuring stuff out. And you can figure them out at the right pace and with someone who's trained to help you close that. There's definitely, I mean, I kind of call it like the therapy hangover. I feel like sometimes when you go through things, you can feel it until you're next to your therapist, and it like sometimes you just got to go to bed with it for sure. But there's also a beauty of the fact that you're going through things in that session, and a skilled therapist will close that for you. Your therapist has no interest in bringing loads of stuff out so that you are not functioning. That's not safe practice. Like, your therapist is there to be with you in it, but then also make sure that you can still function. Therapy is not about opening the can of worms so that everything just spreads out and that you never reel back from it. Therapy is part of that journey of, okay, we're here at the moment, and yes, this is actually a really difficult patch. It's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I'll see you next week at the same time. Like, you've got that support, and you're working with someone. This is what they're trained to do. They're trained to help you do that safely so that you're not just going to spiral out of control. And it can feel like you're spiraling at the beginning if it's new to you and you're looking at things that you've not looked at for a while. It can bring that back up, but you're looking at the problem instead of just avoiding, and then it just kind of creeps up on you. You're doing it in a safe and controlled way so that it isn't all consuming in your life.
I don't think people realize that when you have counselling training, for example, one of the main things that they get you to do is keep an eye on the time, making sure that the conversation that you're having, that you've got enough time for that conversation, and you're not opening up a can of worms 15 minutes before the end. You're being looked after. There has to be a faith and a trust in that therapist. And if you don't have that, then it's not that therapy doesn't work. Perhaps it's that therapist isn't aligned with you. And that happens. That does happen, doesn't it? Like you were saying earlier, potentially that emotion that you were having was something like, I don't know, rejection. Or then stamp rejection on everything, right? Oh, they don't want to go to the cinema with me, rejection. They don't want to see me tonight, rejection. Regardless, you've just completely ignored the reason they gave you. And that rejection emotion wants to come out. And it's like, the point I'm making is that emotion will keep spilling out and destroying situations in your life until you deliberately look at it.
Yep.
You know, and you sit with that therapist and you say, okay, let's talk about rejection. What's going on there? And you unpack it. And like you said, rightly so, you also pack it back in this little box again at the end.
And historically, yeah, absolutely. Because your emotions like, we are, as human beings, we're fueled by emotions, and your emotions can feel, if they're not controlled, they feel like they can control you. And I think therapy helps you control your emotions and have a better understanding and figure them out a bit more. Whereas if you're not doing that and you're not giving them the time and you're not thinking about things and you're not exploring what's in you, that they can control you, and you might not even realize it to begin with. But like, we're fueled by emotions, and sometimes they're in the wrong quantities in the wrong place because they're just stored in that box inside you.
Okay, so people often say to me that they've tried therapists and all that the therapist did was sit there in silence. It felt awkward and they didn't see how that helps. Why did they do that?
Yeah, really interesting. And I kind of feel like I'm saying the same thing, because I think you've got to trust your therapist. When in our lives, in everyday society at the moment, When in our lives do we sit in silence with no stimulation, with no alerts coming through your phone, with nothing that you're looking at? When do you just sit in silence for a prolonged period of time? Most people don't do that. And it's interesting what comes up. And sometimes by just giving yourself a beat, it kind of just gives you a second to be like, oh, yeah, actually, I am feeling this way. Or, oh, I didn't realize I'm actually feeling a bit upset right now. And it's interesting what comes up in silence. And it's a tool that therapists will use. And it can be infuriating, but it's interesting that you're finding it infuriating, isn't it? Like, why are you finding that infuriating? Isn't that interesting? Maybe talk
Everything
about
has meaning. Love that. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it is interesting, the silence. I think it can be frustrating, and you deserve the time with your feelings, and you deserve the time yourself to figure stuff out. And sometimes silence can be great. And the other thing, talk to them about that. I'm hating the silence. Why are we silent? And see what comes from that. Because if you're not enjoying the silence, talk about that. So the silence is there, and the silence can be important. But if it's uncomfortable, take that into the session, because it's interesting what will come from that time. And also, I think now I've kind of had to reframe the whole silence of like, okay, like the how I see silence with my therapist is kind of like, come as you are. Where are we? And just kind of giving me a second to almost recalibrate and just kind of be like, oh yeah, like, where am I? How am I feeling today? We don't do it enough, and maybe we need to do it more for ourselves outside of therapy too. And like you said, isn't it interesting that we get frustrated that there's no stimulation, there's no conversation, there's no noise? What's that about?
So often it's the anxiety of not knowing what to expect out of a therapy session that stops people from reaching out. So I think it'd be really helpful for you to just say what happens during a therapy session. Like, what are they to expect from the initial phone call through to the first session?
Yeah, and people do this slightly differently, but I can talk about how we do it and how I've done it in therapy before. But normally your first session is being able to explain who you are and why you're there, any themes that might be coming up. And even if you're not sure on the themes, that's valuable too. Even I don't really know, I'm here. That's interesting too. But normally your first session's a bit of a pre-consultation. It's as much for the therapist as it is for you as a client. And I think sometimes people forget that. I think sometimes people turn up to therapy and they're like, oh God, here we go. Like they might not be the right therapist for you. And that's fine too. That's interesting. Then you can figure out your next step. But it's an opportunity for you to ask questions and for your therapist to ask questions. There are always some safety things that happen in a pre-consultation, which is just kind of to do with location, confidentiality. They might talk about kind of terms and conditions just so that you really know where you are in the therapeutic relationship. And that's as much for you as it is for them, and vice versa. It's very much, this is how I'm going to respect our time and how I'm going to run the session, how the timings work, how cancellations might work. You kind of do your tick boxes, if you like. And I think by doing that at the beginning of the session, it softens you a little bit, because you realize that it's just another person chatting to you. It's not a scary therapist or like this, oh God, are they going to be thinking about what I'm looking at, what I'm wearing, how I'm acting? It's just normal stuff. And from your pre-consultation and identifying kind of the session plans and how sessions work out and cancellations and any bits that you might need to go through in terms of confidentiality, then you can decide where you go with that session. And it can be as much as, this is what I want to work on, this is my goal, this is what I would like to talk about. And actually, I would really like for you to hold me accountable. You can ask for things too in that first session. You can say, I need practical tools. You can say, I've only got enough money for 6 sessions, or actually, I'm in a really bad place at the moment and I have to keep functioning because I've got to keep working and I've got all these responsibilities. It's an opportunity for you to say what you need in therapy and really think about that as well. And it's also an opportunity for your therapist to explain how they work, what they recommend, and just figure out next steps together. It's not a prescribing. It's not a very sort of transactional, you give me this, I give you that. That's not what the first session's about. It's more in depth than that. It's more conversational. Mental health is so complex, and I think therapy can be seen as quite a scary thing, and that you're going to be really vulnerable and exposed and kind of at the mercy of the therapist. And that's not how it works. It's a very equal relationship, and you're figuring out the fact that you're two people that are going to potentially be working through some stuff together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, in some regards, might be a very clumsy analogy, but it's not dissimilar to dating in a sense. You're building a relationship with someone that you're going to be emotionally intimate with.
Yeah.
You're going to be telling this person potentially stuff you've never told anyone before. And that's got to be the right person. That's got to be someone you feel you can trust. I think sometimes people think that they're going to rock up and it's going to be Yoda sat there, all knowing and all seeing. And that's the part of it that for me is so important for them to understand. A therapist, a counselor, a coach, a psychologist, whatever, they're not there to give you answers. They are not the expert on your life. You are. And what they're doing is they're drawing the answers out of you. And in many ways, they're drawing the questions out of you. It's essentially about focus and need, isn't it? Yeah. It's more about focus and need. So, I mean, I love what you said there. You got just a wonderful, refreshingly less heavy way of explaining therapy. It's nice. So last real big question, as long as you've got time, because I know that we've just gone to town. We've had the best conversation.
We could chat forever, couldn't we?
We really could. And it's amazing. But many say that they would have no idea where to start. They kind of little bit know that they need to go to therapy. They've had a few friends that it's worked for, family members it's worked for, but the whole idea of it just overwhelms them. Where do they start? What's the actual first thing to do?
I think the first thing to do is to go online and just have a bit of a look. Like you said, you were talking about it being similar to dating. I guess there are so many therapists out there. There are so many modalities. It kind of feels like everything's a possibility. And then as soon as you start researching, you realize, oh yeah, actually, I don't like the look of that person because they remind me of this person. Or actually, no, I don't think that I could work with someone who's got opposing views to me on X, Y, and Z. Or the more research you start doing, the more you'll kind of start filtering what you need. And it will be really interesting what comes up. It could be it could be an appearance thing. It could be how they write about themselves, the language that they use. It could be the qualifications. The more you start looking at different types of therapists, you will start subconsciously being like, that's not for me. And sometimes you might just look at something and think, not for me. And it doesn't matter. You don't even have to know why it doesn't work for you. It's not for you. That's fine. If you are going to be emotionally vulnerable with someone, it just has to kind of feel right. And you might be able to explain why it's right. You might not be able to, and that's okay. And so by looking at different therapists, you might start to see words being used or letters together which don't make any sense, and then maybe look at what that means, and kind of you'll start to find bits of information out the more digging you do. Something that we do at Counterpoise is we have kind of 3 different avenues which people can access support, and every practitioner has a profile which you can read about, and then you can also have a phone call if you want to, and use all those things. Use it as like a discovery session, because you might hear someone's tone of voice and that might not be right. And that's okay too. Like, you just start looking at what's out there, and you can do that through the Counterpoise website. You can do that through Psychology Today. You can do that through the Counselling directory. Like, there's so much out there. There's so much, probably a bit too much, to be honest, but you will see what sticks. And the more you look into it, the more things will start sitting with you, and then things might come up and you might be like, yeah, I think that actually might work for me. But go in open-minded. Not everything's a possibility. It can feel really daunting, but you will filter things down. But have an open mind when you are talking to people, because the first therapist you talk to might not be the right person, and that's okay. And you do not owe them or yourself the process of going through sessions that aren't going to work. You can call it. You can say, this isn't right for me for whatever reason. But try not to give up at the first hurdle. Try to explore a little bit.
The way you described that was lovely, because what I could hear in that as well is it might be the first time you start to trust yourself and your own judgment. You're actively taking autonomy in your life. You're actively starting to fight back and starting to move towards something that you want instead of the way you don't want to feel.
Yeah.
And there's no right way. There's no right way. And I think that might be something that's worth saying, is that I think people think they're not doing therapy right, as if there's some right way to do it, as if they've got to show up. And you mentioned it about what people are wearing, how people are sitting, how they're acting, like they're being analysed. And I don't think it's necessarily an analysing. It's more of a just trying to understand somebody, trying to work somebody out so that you can manage them in the right way, so that you can sit with them and understand what it is they want to focus on and what it is they might need.
Yeah.
So they can figure that out.
And I think that there's that whole sort of daunting thought that they might be able to read your mind, or they might be able to, or that they're watching everything that you're doing. Like,
I've legit had that thought. Like, I want to wear a helmet or something.
further down the line, your therapist will know you, and you'll think, "How did you know that?" But it's two people coming together, or if it's couples or group, or however the therapy takes place, it's people coming together, and the only aim of that is to make you feel better as a person and to work on you to get to where you want to. That's the motive of the session. They're not there to expose and bring loads up and work through things that you don't want to work through. It's not like that. The session that you are going to is purely for you, and they are on your side. They're not trying to catch you out, or, oh, are you saying the right thing? Are you doing the right thing? Are you presenting the right way? It's not that. This is just for you, and they are there just for you.
Yeah, that's beautiful and so true. Just before we go, is there anything that you would like to say, make people aware of? Just get out there.
Obviously, I've spoken about my story and kind of how Counterpoise came, and I'm so proud of Counterpoise and everything that we've created. And if you are stuck, if any of this resonates, you can reach out to us as people or through Counterpoise to get support. That our main motive as a business is to help people. And if Counterpoise isn't right for you, that's absolutely fine. If none of this resonates with you, that's absolutely fine. But I hope if you can take anything from this, it's that there are always people out there if you need to reach out for support. And if you are feeling lonely, if you are feeling stuck, yes, I'm here talking about my business, but it's not just my business. That might not be right for you. That just know that there's hope, and you're not on your own, and that there are good people out there. And I hope that you can take that from this podcast.
Yeah, I think they will. I think they can see who you are. You're a wonderful person doing really good work. And Kitty's here to help you find the right help. And what she's saying now, I think, is that it might not necessarily come from Counterpoise, but she can definitely signpost you and help you work it out in this very overwhelming place that is life. So I just want to say a massive thank you to you. I love what you're doing. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
I loved every second, and thank you for everything that you're doing. It's really important, and it's having such an impact. So thank you.
So just to finish up with this episode, I think everyone has understood the theme. We are talking about mental health. We're talking about how we feel and how we don't want to feel, that feeling of being stuck, how those past traumas can continue to echo and ripple through our life. Like after an earthquake, you have little aftershocks, and that's what trauma's like. It's a big event. Something happens. It doesn't have to be all sinister. Sometimes it could be being told at 6 years old that you can't sing, and the impacts that have. And then you have these aftershocks through life. And the message we're trying to get across here is it's not weak to ask for help. In fact, you owe it to yourself. You owe it to the people in your life to be okay, to feel okay, to be brave. I know you're scared. But guess what? That's brilliant. You know why? Because it's the exact ingredient needed to be brave. So be brave, make a phone call, look on the internet, talk to a friend, get a recommendation, whatever it is, and finally get help. So you can reframe what happened, you can get that support, and you can take those small steps towards recovery. Thank you for listening this week, and I will see you next week on another episode of the Johnny Lawrence Podcast.